Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Metropolitan Club. I'm Deborah Price, the principal of Ice Miller Whiteboard and a member of CMC's Board of Directors. And it's great to see everyone here today on this sunny afternoon. Beautiful sunshine coming through the windows. Today's forum, PUCO Chairman Asim Haque, is sponsored by my very own Ice Miller. And our folks are all over here in the front. Stop up and say hello. Many of you in the audience know us already. And please don't feel strange to anybody. Introduce yourselves at your own tables also. So thanks to a strong history of innovation, public-private partnerships, and good government policy, we mostly don't even notice public utilities until the gas goes out, or someone installs a pipeline in your backyard, or the rail crossing down the street stops working. Utility and transportation regulation began in Ohio in 1867 when the General Assembly established the Office of the Commission of Railroads and Telegraphs. Since then, the Public Utilities Commission of Ohio mission has been to assure all residential and business consumers access to adequate, safe, and reliable utility services at fair prices, while facilitating an environment that provides competitive choices. It's with great pleasure that I have the privilege of introducing the Commissioner today. Since he's an alum of our law firm, it's with great pride that we have him here, and I'm so glad that we can welcome Chairman of the Public Utilities Commission of Ohio, Asim Haque. Welcome, Chairman. And we also have, to help facilitate this program, Editor-in-Chief of Business First of Columbus, our own Doug Brockman. Buchanan. I'm sorry, I said that wrong. Now, Chairman Haque will open with brief comments, then join Doug for a conversation. Chairman Haque, the podium is all yours.
Thank you. First, thanks so very much to the Columbus Metropolitan Club for the invitation to address all of you today. I've admired these events from afar in the past, and I'm truly honored to have the opportunity to participate in today's event. I'd also be remiss if I didn't thank today's sponsor, Ice Miller, LLP, and thank you to Judge Price for that wonderful intro. Deborah is someone I've admired for a long time, and it's really an honor for me to have been introduced by you, so thank you very much. I am a very proud alum of the Ice Miller Law Firm. There are very fine professionals at the firm who I consider friends and mentors. And to those of you who are ethics hawks, since Ice Miller represents clients before the commission, I refrained from eating a morsel of food at lunch today. So thank you, Ice Miller, for that unintended consequence. I'm kidding. Thank you very much again to all of you for the invitation to be here. The Public Utilities Commission of Ohio, or the PUCO for short, and to note, the short version is not PUCO. Sometimes our decisions may make you want to PUCO, but the short version is actually just a full statement of the letters in the acronym, the PUCO. The PUCO is a state agency that gets a lot of attention. And why is that? There are a couple of dozen state agencies and over 50 boards and commissions in the state, but the PUCO is an entity that is pretty consistently in the news cycle. We do the basics of what you think we do. We ensure that your public utilities are run safely and reliably at fair prices. We ensure that this is the case for your investor-owned electric, gas, telecommunications, and water utilities in the state, and we also have a certain level of purview over the trucking, rail, moving industries, as well as transportation network companies like Uber and Lyft. All of that is extraordinarily important to people and businesses in this state. We regulate essential services that most all of us take for granted. When you go home at night, you expect to be able to flip a switch and power your home. And you expect to be able to turn on the burner to cook dinner and be kept warm throughout the duration of your evening. Businesses that don't have reliable utility services won't be able to develop and sell products and services. And if any of these services are priced exorbitantly, then the underlying fabric of our economy could be disrupted. That's what you'd expect we do. And in my opinion, in conjunction and in partnership with our investor-owned utilities, I think we all collectively do it pretty well. But what you maybe don't realize is that while we are doing these things, we are driving energy policy for the state of Ohio. Energy policy, again, directly impacts the economy we live in, as well as the air that we breathe. And that's why the PUCO gets so much attention. That's why the PUCO is constantly in the news cycle. And Ohio has been ground zero for some of the most incredible energy disruptors in the country over the past 5 years. And I'm going to spend a little time talking to you about these disruptors. Specifically, I think there are 3 disruptors of real note where the PUCO has had to play a major role in navigating, and I'll spend most of my time on the 3rd disruptor because it's what the PUCO is currently working on. First, the clean energy revolution. The PUCO's mission and the mission of commissions like ours across the country is essentially to ensure safe, reliable utility services at fair prices. Nowhere in that mission does it say that we are supposed to also regulate for a cleaner power system. However, as I have said many times since I was appointed commissioner, the clean energy revolution cannot be ignored. Along with the director of Ohio EPA, Craig Butler, I led the state's compliance efforts with the Clean Power Plan, a very ambitious regulation promulgated by President Obama's U.S. EPA to try and curtail emissions from coal plants. I can tell you firsthand that trying to balance the PUCO's mission of reliability and pricing with a clean power system was and continues to be very challenging, but it's a charge that the PUCO now embraces. The policy objectives of reliability, affordability, and clean must coexist. The second disruptor, the future of coal and nuclear generation that are struggling due to the shale revolution and resulting low natural gas prices. In 2013 and 2014, cases were filed at the Commission regarding the future of coal and nuclear power plants that history will recognize as a few of the most important landmark cases in the history of energy regulation. It is a debate now happening across the country, and Ohio was the initial test ground. The PUCO was at the center of that conversation from 2013 to 16, and now that conversation has moved to the federal level where President Trump, Energy Secretary Rick Perry, and the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission are now attempting to tackle the issue. While I won't get into the weeds of these cases and the policy issues associated with them, when the PUCO finally adjudicated them, I myself personally felt real concern that the customer, the manufacturing plant, the small business, the human being were forgotten in the debate. And as a public servant, I needed to change that tenor for our agency and the state. That brings us to the 3rd disruptor, grid modernization, that the PUCO embodies in its initiative, Power Forward. Power Forward is built upon 2 pillars: innovation and the concept that this innovation needs to enhance the customer electricity experience. I firmly believe that we are on the cusp of a revolution in the electric industry as we are in a very unique moment in time where there is symmetry between customers wanting more from their utilities, utilities wanting to invest in grid modernization, and governmental will currently to pair innovation and customer betterment. Let me talk about the changing customer for a minute. Power Forward has already had 2 phases. The first was in April of last year, and phase 1 was really about building the business case for Power Forward. Why even explore this? And part of what we found is that customer demographics are shifting towards a mentality where they want more, and they want more from their utilities. The same old service from our electric utilities will not be acceptable, and I think our electric utilities know that. Millennials, our newest comers to the bill-paying economy, have never experienced life without the internet and are used to much more interaction and control over the services they are consuming. I think customers can still, on a month-to-month basis, be surprised when they open up their utility bills, and it doesn't need to be that way. Technology exists right now where a customer's experience with their utility can be far enhanced with so much more control over how they consume and what their final price tag will be. There is also an entire world of, we'll call it smart items that has yet to be unleashed in the electric industry, cleaner technologies that can be deployed in homes and businesses for societal betterment, and investments in the grid that will create efficiencies, eventually resulting in bill decreases. There is also governmental will to extend beyond its typical reactive box to explore this new world. In Phase 2 of Power Forward, the PUCO spent much time exploring grid architecture. Now, we are a bunch of accountants, economists, lawyers, but if we are going to authorize investment in this space and create the type of innovative marketplace that we want to create, we need to have a firm understanding of what we need to invest in and why. I've said on many occasions that this is not an open bank account for the utilities. And so in that vein, we are playing the role of consumer protectorate as we advance in this space. We want for investments to be made that will provide net value to customers. At the same time, we need to create a regulatory environment that allows for innovation to flourish and to eventually provide that value. Finally, the state's utilities and new stakeholders like Amazon, Tesla, Nest, and so many others want to advance in this space. A few recent examples include AEP Ohio's request for recovery associated with the Columbus Smart Cities Initiative, as well as a request pending before the Commission right now from First Energy in Akron requesting approval of a distribution platform modernization program. Change is coming. It's probably an overused adage, but it is. The customer demographics are shifting. Utilities want to invest in this space, and since that is indeed the case, it was incumbent upon the agency that drives energy policy in this state to take a hard look at all of this to ensure that this change is done right. Power Forward Phase 3 will be the most watched grid modernization effort in the country this year. It has been covered extensively in utility and energy trade press. We have over 70 national and local energy experts coming in to talk to us about the future of the distribution system, electric vehicles, battery storage, the data marketplace, cybersecurity, and of course, the PUCO's rate-making and rate design regimes. And just as you have dramatically changed how you view telephony, you may wake up one day, remember this lunch and this handsome Indian man talking to you about the electricity revolution, and be a part of a select group of folks that can say, I heard about this first. Power Forward Phase 3 will take place over a 2-week span, March 6th through the 8th and March 20th through the 22nd at the offices of the PUCO, and the event will be broadcasted on public television and will be archived and available on YouTube and the PUCO's website. Thank you, and I look forward to taking questions.
Great. You able to get that on there? Real nice and high there. Yeah, perfect. All right, so Asim, we met a few years ago when you were a 40 under 40 for Columbus Business First. Was that 2 years ago or 3 years ago?
I think it was 2 years ago.
2 years ago. So have you turned 40?
I have not yet. Yes, thank you. My age has been revealed. I'm blushing. No, I have not yet turned 40, still the ripe age of 38.
Okay, and how did you become chairman at 38?
Wow, that is a sordid tale. So,
Sweet.
So I was appointed to the commission after spending the first 7+ years of my career at Ice Miller, and then about really under a year at Honda. It was literally right place, right time, right demographics that I got an opportunity to become a commissioner at the PUCO. I think I was fulfilling an unexpired term. And so I think the administration and the nominating council et al. Wanted somebody who had a little bit of experience, but the problem with a lot of experience, depending on what your level of experience is that your proclivities may have already been proclaimed to those on the outside, and that in itself presents a challenge, I think, to getting an appointment. Regardless, long story short, I had just a very random lunch when I was back in Columbus from Marysville, and somebody said, hey, you should really think about applying for that commissioner seat. And being a political nobody, I thought to myself, that is insane,
Right.
but was convinced to do it and just kept on getting through these various phases, the nominating council, which is a
Right.
12-member panel, all the way up through Senate confirmation. I feel very fortunate to be here. I never thought that I would have an opportunity to serve the state like in this capacity.
Sure.
And so every single day I drive into work, I feel very fortunate.
Oh, that's great. That's great. So, okay, so on Power Forward, again, Ohio is taking a proactive look at this, and we want to get out in front of what may be coming from the utilities as far as, I assume smart meters is the main thing that people are going to see, but it goes beyond that?
Absolutely. So a way I like to describe the potential benefits of Power Forward is to, first of all, a couple different metaphors. So again, I think about telephony, and I think about mobile telephony, and now the smartphone is part of our everyday absolute necessity use.
Right.
Okay, now that is not that new. I still remember, not having a cell phone, period, until roughly 2002. We're not talking about tech that is, that far in the past. When you think about what was necessary to allow for this revolution to happen, undoubtedly an element of, whether it's the FCC or other, governmental will had to be expressed, and a regulatory and governmental climate had to be created to allow for this great technology to proliferate.
Right.
So I very much view Powered Forward from that lens.
Yeah.
And as far as the impact on society broadly, I like to think of, if we're looking at an atom, this is my scientific background coming out, okay? So if you look at like an atom, and the nucleus of that atom is just a human being sitting on their phone, on their sofa, and all they have, okay, I actually lived like this for some years, where all I had was a sofa, a phone, and nothing else. Whenever my friends would come over, they asked if I got robbed, but then I got married and I bought a bunch of stuff. But if that's all you have, but you still have to pay your utility bills,
Right.
you want an element of control over what that month to month is going to be.
Yeah.
Okay? And so from that atom, expanding that all the way out to your immediate vicinity. Do you want a distributed energy resource on your property? Do you want solar panels and a battery on your property? When I was at Honda, we were often in discussions about do we want to develop, at that time, there was a lot of discussion about wind turbines on a separate piece of property that would help power Honda's manufacturing facilities. Beyond that, even look at what we're dealing with right now in Columbus. It's a wonderful thing to deal with, the Smart Cities Initiative, and all of the potential that there is to come out of that. Electric vehicle charging stations, something that has and will continue to be a hot topic, not just at the PUCO, but at other agencies. We are looking at a holistic betterment of society potentially through grid modernization. And all we're trying to do at the agency is educate staff, educate commissioners, educate the state, explain to the state what all betterment exists out there, and create the right regulatory climate to, while I may not be clear, while I may not 100% know that the electricity industry, what that iPhone is going to be, we've got to create the right regulatory climate to allow for that to develop.
Right, because if you had the right framework, then when the utilities come and say they want to be compensated, frankly, or ratepayers to pay for this, that, and the other investment, I assume then that would help you in your decision making.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I think our utility stakeholders have been wonderful in engaging in this dialogue of, is utility regulation going to be, business as usual? Is it going to be the same as it's always looked? Because when you think about utility regulation, as it has always existed on the distribution system, we look at costs, we look at expenses, we audit those things, we analyze them, we have rate cases, and we say, okay, here's what we will allow for you to recover plus a little return,
Right.
okay? If we are looking at the concept of ensuring that we are providing net value to customers, and if the utilities themselves want to work outside of their box a little bit, how can we, outside of that typical rate-making regime, how can we ensure that that net value is being provided to customers? And does it change the level of analysis conducted by the commission on a going forward basis? Does it change the level of analysis conducted by the commission to require that the utilities have proven that some form of net value has been provided to customers before we allow for the next incremental investment? And that's not something that we have, that I think we've gotten a great handle on at the agency, and it's something that we're going to be looking to do. But also, we have to create a marketplace to, of course, allow for the utilities to invest, because we need to ensure that the grid in and of itself is ready, but also create a marketplace that allows for other innovators to also flourish as well, with, of course, in conjunction with the typical stakeholders at the agency.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, obviously, some of this new technology is not going to work out, or is not going to deliver the benefits that they were originally proposed. Are you saying that there may be a way to continuously look at what the utilities are spending, what the return they're getting, instead of having it be just being, okay, here it is, go do it?
Sure.
Okay. All right. You mentioned the Green Revolution. What about coal and nuclear? Is it important that Ohio keep them and have coal and nuclear plants?
That is a very challenging question. That I would say, as an attorney, that the commission has asked and answered. Look, I think where we sit today, the commission made decisions on essentially those questions. Those decisions were overturned effectively by the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, and now the question is being analyzed in Washington. My concern about this discussion and this debate is what's happened now is there's not a deep level of granularity in the analysis. And what I mean by that is, what's now happened is all coal plants and all nuclear plants have been lumped into this category that the country is now calling base load, okay? The thing is this. I think you've got to start peeling the onion a little bit associated with this issue. The first question you have to ask is, what type of generation fuel mix do you want for this country to have on a going forward basis? And after you ask that question, you then have to start asking the second level and third level questions. And those questions will be different for every policymaker. But for me, it's, okay, what's your generation fuel mix in this country? What do you want it to look like? Okay, then from there, a question that you have to ask is, well, it also has to be economical. And so when you lump all of these plants into one shebang, and you're not asking the question of, well, which of these plants are maybe on the verge of retiring and are really out of the market and would take a lot of money to rehab to get to a place where they would be, close to being profitable? We're not even asking that question. And I think that's an important question to ask. I think the debate happening across the country right now is a very appropriate debate to be having, but it's not a granular enough debate. And then, another important question, so this is maybe the third level or fourth level, depending on who the policymaker is let's not ignore the clean initiative. Okay, so now we've taken these units and we've maybe parsed through the economics of the issue. Now we've got to parse through the environmental facets of it. And so what I worry about is that level of granularity is not something that I think we're seeing right now at the federal level. And the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission has asked essentially for more information. Looks like we're going to be taking some action through our regional wholesale marketplace operator. And so I just hope from a policy perspective, I think it's a very important debate. Obviously, the commission took it very seriously. I hope from a policy perspective that we're not shortchanging citizens, and we are asking the right questions, and we're doing as deep a dive analysis as we can possibly do to figure out what the right solution is.
And then on the flip side, how do you, as a commission, encourage more solar, more wind power? Do we have enough here? And how do you try to regulate that when the state legislature keeps getting involved?
Yeah, so look, we take our cues from the state legislature. So the legislature creates and passes laws, and then we implement those laws. Mm-hmm. And so from there's sort of a few items under development always. There's the renewable portfolio standards and energy efficiency mandates. Those are always the subject of tremendous debate, but we just continue to do whatever the legislature asks us to do associated with those mandates. And then I think there is opportunity through Power Forward to explore these technologies from especially a distributed energy resource perspective. So, look, maybe the sun doesn't shine as much as it does in Florida. Maybe the wind doesn't blow as much as it does in Texas or up in Iowa. But there are other opportunities that are under development, I think, from tech providers out there that are classified as distributed energy resources that we can create the right climate for, which will thus then reduce coal emissions, so I think that there are some items that the PUCO can impact that will effectuate a cleaner environment.
And for maybe people who don't know, what is distributed energy? What do you mean by that?
Yeah, so typically distributed energy resources, the concept encompasses a number of different, we'll just call it gadgetry, but generally speaking right now, a distributed energy resource is thought of as a resource that can either generate or store power on site. Okay, so we think about solar panels on your house. That's a distributed energy resource. We also now are thinking about the concept of an electric vehicle charging station as a device that has stored power that, if something were to happen on the system, could be utilized to actually feed power into your home and to the system broadly. And so I think the definition of distributed energy resources, while one thing for a long period of time, has now really started to expand to include a number of other things. And that is actually a driver for many states that are exploring grid modernization. Okay. For us, it's part of the puzzle.
Yeah, well, why does the grid need to be modernized to make that happen?
Yeah, so the current distribution system is a system that has been in place for decades. Some in my staff say over a century. And so if you were going to gravitate towards this new world, obviously you have got to, from an infrastructure standpoint, right, you have got to see whether or not the grid is ready for that, just broadly. Okay. Are there non-wire solutions that would be better to be utilized for this modern world? You think about when we're talking about a customer being able to better interact with their home energy usage, yeah, that requires data, that requires communications between. Okay. So we're not just dealing with the wire that you see driving down your street going from, yeah, pole to pole anymore. Okay. This is a much broader spectrum of grid architecture and investment than I think that we are used to seeing.
Right. And again, the end goal is to lower, I suppose, reliability and lowering people's bills. The idea being give people more control over how they use power, and they're going to naturally, use it better.
The end goal is to give customers the choice to do that. Okay, so if the baseline technology doesn't exist to, yeah, allow for a customer, I'll give you another metaphor. Okay, so when you go grocery shopping, yeah, you can on one end of the spectrum you can go to Aldi, yes, okay, or on the other end of the spectrum you can go to Giant Eagle. I go to Kroger, which I think is somewhere in between, yeah, there. I think Trader Joe's. Trader Joe's. There you go. So when you think about the customer right now, The customer gets a bill that is backwards looking,
Right.
that says, pay this or we'll turn you off, okay? That is quite the mandate to a very captive customer base. Most of us are used to it, all right? But there is a customer segment out there that is growing on a very consistent basis that thinks this is asinine, okay? And so I think, when I say, when we're talking about what the eventual outcomes for Power Forward are, again, it is to create a regulatory climate. It is to create a regulatory climate that will allow for an innovative marketplace to proliferate. That is really the end goal of Power Forward, and that will require utility investment. That will require utility investment that will take some outside-of-the-box thinking from a regulatory agency that's used to doing things a certain way.
A very traditional way, for sure. We are going to be moving to audience questions in just a few minutes. The microphone is back there, so don't be shy. You don't have to be a lawyer to ask him questions, but it probably helps, I suppose. So we'll do that. One more question, though, before we turn it over to the audience. So you mentioned all of this data. I assume that there's still plenty of people who don't want their house communicating, with things, right? I mean, there's security concerns.
Yep. So first thing I'll say is I do think that even that sentiment, and we explored this in phase 1 of Power Forward, I do think that even that sentiment is changing. Okay. I think most people who are plugged in these days know that there's no privacy anymore, okay? So I do think that that sentiment is changing. I've seen that change dramatically since day 1 at the commission, where in the first few weeks of the commission, I signed an order, former Chair Todd Snitchler, I signed an order allowing for smart meter opt-out. Okay? So customers actually right now can opt out of receiving these meters. But I do think that there is a dynamic that's changing within the consumer base wherein consumers fully realize that they have no privacy, okay? So now, that's not an excuse to say we're gonna do whatever we want, right? Not at all. So we are also going to spend a good amount of time in phase 3 discussing the concept of cybersecurity. I think it's an extraordinarily important component to pair with this new marketplace that we are trying to create. Because, look, I think the second something happens, all right, it's 2 steps back. And so we are undoubtedly conscious of it, and we have to be very, very careful about, as we progress in this space, not just opening the door to anybody out there who wants to create a threat or vulnerability in the cyberspace. Right.
No, that makes sense. Okay, first question.
Hi, my name is Amanda Sage, and I'm a marketing consultant with the Metropolitan Club. I have always been an apartment dweller as an adult, so this may not be something that the PUCO deals with, but I'm also a millennial who wants control and hates the asinine payment at the end of the month when I know I didn't use that much energy. What do you have any of control over how apartment companies, management companies, dole out utilities, especially when they own the utility company? And is that something that you're looking at changing?
Yeah, so apartments right now, you are either metered by the local utility, or very likely you are metered by your landlord effectively, who has contracted with a third party, okay? That concept is called submetering, and this is a very, very hot topic on Cap Square right now. The PUCO's taken action on submetering that they view to be true to its jurisdiction. And I've said this in a number of different venues, that if we are to do more in this space, then we need more jurisdiction to do more in this space. And right now the PUCO is not comfortable operating outside of what we've done. And here's what we did. What we did was we acted to prevent the price gouging element of submetering. Now, what's missing from that is potentially some of the consumer protectorate opportunities that would exist if you were, for instance, an AEP Ohio customer. But right now, based upon a PUCO order on submetering, post a long investigation associated with submetering, what the PUCO said is that you sub-metered customer cannot be charged more than what your local regulated public utility would have charged you for the same level of consumption. So that's what the PUCO has done. A very, very hot topic in Columbus, a very, very hot topic with the dispatch. But if you read the latest dispatch long piece about submetering, you will see that some submetering companies have removed, $8, $9 charges from the bill as a result of that decision.
Hi, Bill, before you start, I was supposed to state, please say your name. State your name, ask your question, and
no editorializing.
Yeah, I know you.
Well, I'm Bill Lafayette. I'm not a lawyer. I'm an economist, which is doubtless worse. My question is the vulnerability of the grid itself to natural events, to terrorism, what have you. How worried should we be, and what steps are being taken to make us less worried?
Yeah. Thank you, Bill, and good to see you. Bill and I served on a board together for many years. So I think just a little regulatory background piece here, Bill, which is there is a huge chunk of the grid that's called the bulk power system. And the bulk power system and the safety of the bulk power system, reliability, et cetera, is governed by an entity called the North American Electric Reliability Corporation, or NERC. They promulgate standards that every operator on the bulk power system has to adhere to, and that includes standards associated with cyber and physical security. Those are where you're going to see some real potential bad actors go after the grid, is on the bulk, bigger power system, generation, transmission. Now, the PUCO and our investor-owned utilities, they're responsible for essentially the substation to your home, okay? And so there is still concern, but since the bigger hanging fruit that a bad actor could cherry pick is on the bulk power system, there's not as much concern. At the same time, I think the regulator plays an interesting role in conjunction with utilities. First of all, I think all of our utilities, electric, gas, water, telecom, I think they do a wonderful job of protecting from a cyber and physical standpoint their systems. And how I know that is I fortunately, knock on wood, it's probably going to happen tomorrow, I have not received the phone call from the governor saying, what the hell's going on the distribution grid? So thank goodness for that. But as the distribution grid becomes more data-driven and smarter, I think we have to be very conscious of that in tandem with ensuring that utilities are taking the right measures to protect, in this more digitized grid world, consumers. Now, last thing I'll say is we also have to be very careful about requiring too much information to come from our utilities, because everything that hits our shop, generally speaking, is public record. And so it is a challenging dynamic, and we've got to thread the needle there. But fortunately, so far, I think our utilities have done a brilliant job. And as we continue to digitize this space, we'll be very thoughtful of it.
And hopefully you didn't just jinx us.
Yes, sorry, that happens.
Next question.
Chairman Haque, my name is Rick Colby, and I'm a board member of the Downtown Residents Association of Columbus, otherwise known as DRAC. And when I first moved downtown a few years ago from Dublin, I decided to kind of reinvent it midlife and try the city living thing. I had a very nice place that I lived, a townhome down by the Scioto River, but I noticed that my utilities were marked up quite a bit, and I found out it was due to submetering. And I would respectfully submit to you that residents of downtown Columbus need the PUCO to be more aggressive and forward-leaning on the issue of submetering. And I know that you said, well, you do what the legislature says, and then but right now, there's bills in the legislature, as you know, and they're bogged down due to lobbying. We really need you, the PUCO, to step it up on sub-metering and take a leadership role. And I'm just wondering what the reluctance is to be more assertive on utility sub-metering.
Yeah, I'd encourage you, Rick, to, if you're not a lawyer, to hire counsel and look at the docket. And our explanation for why our jurisdiction is what we believe it to be is in that docket. And so outside of that and the information I've relayed to you, it's really all I can tell you.
No, I understand that, sir. But what I'm saying is you can take a leadership role and guide the legislature in passing bills that would actually get to consumer protections for homeowners of downtown Columbus.
So again, I want to be very clear about the relationship between the PUCO and the legislature. The legislature is the entity in the state of Ohio that passes laws. When the legislature seeks my opinion about a myriad of things, it is always provided. I come as a neutral arbiter of information, and I say to members of the legislature, on one side you will have this issue, on another side you will have this issue. I have had conversations with members of the legislature about sub-metering, but again, they are the lawmakers and we are the regulator.
Okay. Would you be willing to meet with members of the Downtown Residents Association of Columbus to talk about this?
The PUCO's doors are always open to constituents.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next question.
Hi, Craig Foster from Energility LLC. I'm just wondering, as Power Forward happens, and we just had some changes to the net metering laws for solar, where we might stand with virtual net metering, where I could buy a piece of a solar collector that's in a park across the street, that would get fed into the grid, and then my percentage would be credited towards my bill.
Yeah, it's a really interesting concept. Unfortunately, a concept that has not come up really at the commission yet. So we actually just promulgated our net metering rules. Actually, let me rephrase. We had an en banc hearing or oral arguments associated with our net metering rules. We are, because of where the net metering marketplace is situated, we don't have a ton of activity in this space, and so I would say that all things net metering are really, to me, in its infancy in the state of Ohio. But as we get to the next level through Power Forward et al., as we are creating this environment here in the state of Ohio, we may see that ratcheted up, which will require the next level discussion, such as virtual net metering. But a very interesting concept.
Okay, Holly?
Holly Hollingsworth. So that we all can appreciate it as customers, you're looking at utilities for the state of Ohio. So when you look at the other 49 states, who are the rock stars? You're talking about the future and where you see us going. We've got the Smart Cities designation. Which states are doing really exciting things or things you wish you could see happen within Ohio? Who's really doing exciting things that you are hoping we'll see in our future in Ohio?
Yeah, the cutting edge states in the grid mod space over the past couple of years. California has done some, I would say, piecemeal grid modernization events, opportunities, and so they are a state that I think folks look at in the grid mod space. New York did a very comprehensive New York Reforming the Energy Vision, which is highly publicized and is a proceeding that gained a lot of traction, especially in national trade press. But leadership's important as well. In this space. The chair of the New York Commission got a job running the grid in Australia. And so she left the New York Commission. And I think for the most part, folks believe that piece is at a sort of standstill right now. Minnesota has done something kind of a contemporary of Ohio. When you think of California and New York, you think to yourself, these folks are always going to be extremely progressive, but we do have some contemporaries out there. Illinois, with their next grid proceeding, is also doing some good stuff. So we have some other states to look at. We, before we launched Power Forward, we undoubtedly looked at what other states were doing. I think the real difference between what we're doing and what those states are doing is they began with sort of whether it's technology-based or a particular objective or outcome, this is what we want, and we're going to work backwards. Whereas we have tackled this very organically, ground up, with just, we want to ensure that we are pairing innovation with customer betterment and creating the right regulatory environment. So it's a different type of proceeding, and I think it's suited us well. It's behooved us well.
I mean, not even half the states are even talking about this.
Correct.
Are they? I mean, I thought it was pretty rare that Ohio is getting out there.
And look, when you think about economic development in the state, I think it's important from an energy perspective that those who are looking to locate to the state know and understand that government is on the cutting edge of this stuff. Mm-hmm. And so I think if you're not looking at this, then you're doing your state a disservice.
Okay. We will have time for one more question after him if somebody else wants to step up. Go right ahead.
Hi there. I'm Dr. Evan Bloomer, also not an attorney, but I do have the advantage of knowing Chairman Haque both in a professional capacity and also as a friend. And knowing you in these various ways, I do know that one of the most important lenses that you use as you think about these hugely complicated issues is the consumer, and how is the consumer affected and what's best for the consumer. At the same time, there is another state agency who has its charge to represent the consumers, being the Consumers Council. And as an observer of a whole bunch of the Commission's proceedings, what I often see is that the Commission and its staff, having gone through its appropriate due diligence and processes, ends up at odds with the Consumers Council. And it almost seems a little bit of a schoolyard fight sometimes. I care more about the consumers than you care about the consumers. But what ends up happening is that these two state agencies are at odds in a way that adds to the adds burden to the regulatory process. It extends things out. It often results in court challenges. It increases the overall cost, both financial and social cost, of getting things done. So my real question to you is, how can we writ large, think about that system differently so that that consumer protection perspective gets integrated earlier so that it becomes part of the core of a case and not sort of a battle later as a case unfolds?
Yeah, Evan, thank you very much. That's a great question. Look, I think that there is sort of a spectrum, when you're looking at the consumer protection element, there's a spectrum of where everybody sits, okay? The utilities themselves, I will give them credit. I mean, they are really talking about the customer these days, and they are really focused on bettering the customers' lives. I have not only seen it through media and press releases, but in talking to management and actually seeing what types of endeavors are filed with the commission. I see it in their actions as well. So there's that level. There's also the level of where the agency sits, the PUCO sits, and we balance a number of different interests. We balance the interests of course, the consumer. We balance the interests of the utility. We balance the interests of the manufacturer, the industrial customer. We balance the interests of the environmental customer. But we have to balance the interests of a number of different entities at the agency, and so that's also somewhere on the spectrum. Now, the Ohio Consumers Council, who is a wonderful advocate for consumers here in the state, their focus is very, very sort of, if they're on the spectrum, they're not balancing those same interests, for instance, as the PUCO is balancing. So I think, look, the tenor of any state agency will depend on what their board thinks, what their leaders think, et cetera, et cetera. And so, right now the tenor at the Consumers Council is one of being very, what I'll say, concerned about any PUCO decision that has the potential to raise rates. And that's the tenor over there right now. I'm no judge of whether that's the appropriate tenor or not the appropriate tenor, but that's what we're all collectively, that's what we're all seeing from that group right now. The concept of regulatory lag and due process, it's always a challenge at these agencies. I mean, we have to let for so many parties intervene. We have to let everybody have a voice. That's government. I don't think I'd change that piece, but is there, will there be, room in the future to perhaps accelerate proceedings, make things a little more automatic? Potentially. But I think, your concern is noted.
Yeah, that tension's always going to be there. I mean, you've got consumer advocates on one side and utilities on the other. It's an adversarial system that has worked, fairly well so far. That's all the time we have. I'm going to turn it over to Judge Price.
Well, thank you. Thank our guests, Chairman Haque and Doug Buchanan, and our sponsor, Ice Miller. I hope you all enjoyed today's forum. We want you to know that you can view and share today's forum and all the forums on CTV, Columbus Television, WOSU, PBS affiliates, and through Ohio Channel, and anytime at Columbus Metropolitan Club's website via YouTube. Thank you all for being here. We look forward to seeing you next week on Wednesday and every Wednesday. Have a nice afternoon. Thank you.